Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. So today's video is going to be about how I made this prairie dog for the Calgary Zoo. One more doll down, which is really great. So I'll go through the whole process of making him. He's got a ball and socket armature inside. So the armature is a medium-sized armature for the spine, and then the legs have a smaller sized armature because they've got little dainty hands. So I have a video over on my Patreon if you want to know how I created the custom armature for this doll. It's available for my $5 and up tiers, as well as a lot of other things. But yeah, so if you want to see how I made him, then keep watching. Okay, so I originally sculpted the headpiece out of Sculpey Original. I have a video on my channel, I'll try and remember to link it, but I never remember, on how I sculpted this head, the entire process, so you can check that out if you want to know how I sculpted it. So once it's been sculpted and baked, I can start painting all of the pieces that need to be painted. So it's usually around the eyes, the nose, mouth, ears, or anything like that. I like to prime my pieces before I apply any sort of paint, so I apply a primer that's mainly for canvases. I find it works really well for resins and polymer clay. It's by the brand Prairie and Matisse. It's just white basic canvas that creates a nice tooth for the paint to stick to. So once that's dry, I can go ahead and fill all the pieces in that want to be painted. So I'm using a different type of paint by the brand Chromacryl. It's Australian brand, and it's pretty cheap, and I really like the consistency and the quality of the paint. It's just a water-based acrylic paint, so I'm sure you'll be able to find something in your local craft store that's equivalent or better or something like that. But I'm just going around it in some black and brown paint, and leave that to dry, and I'll probably do another coat of paint once all of the faux fur has been applied to the face. Same deal for the feet. So the feet are a resin cast that is originally for my squirrel doll, and I just modified the claws to look more like a prairie dog with some epoxy sculpt, and I have a video on epoxy sculpt. If you don't know what that is, I go into details about how to use it and stuff like that. But it dries pretty solid, so it's no chance of it cracking or anything like that, or breaking easily. It's a really handy thing to use. And yeah, going ahead and painting all of the pieces in that Chromacryl paint again. I originally painted the pads in a pink colour, but then I decided I didn't want them pink, so I ended up painting them black once they were already attached to the doll. And then the pink was looking a bit odd to me, so I did some more Google referencing, and they look more black than pink, so I changed it to black. Moving on to the faux fur. So I'm using this particular faux fur I ordered from China specifically for this doll. It had more, actually I got this locally. The one that I ordered from China came pink. So that one didn't work for this prairie dog, so I managed to find this in a local craft store called Spotlight. It's perfect. It's exactly what I was looking for. It's got a brown tone to it. I just needed to add some more red orangey yellow tone to it, which I did at the end of the doll. But yeah, I thought this faux fur worked really well. It had the right texture. As you can see, it's got a bit of brown underneath it, and it's got that flecking that you can find on a prairie dog. So once I've drawn all of the pieces that I from my pattern, I can start cutting it all out. So this one I'm going to be sewing it up on the sewing machine. Some dolls I do sew by hand, so a lot of the bongo dolls that are coming up I sewed by hand, and it took a long time. But it just depends on what type of doll that I'm doing, which determines what how I'm going to sew it. So whether it's going to be hand sewn or machine sewn. I kind of like using the sewing machine more because it's a lot faster. It's a lot more sturdy. The stitching's better quality, and you know, there's less risk of it coming undone. And yeah, like I said, it's a lot faster too, so it's a bit less of a headache. I personally don't like hand sewing things. I just don't like sewing, full stop. But yeah, we you know, gotta do what you gotta do, right? So this is what the pattern looks like once it's been sewn up on the sewing machine, and left the back end open so I can flip it the right way around. Also the leg area I've left open and given it enough space for to be able to flip the legs through. And I also left the neck open as well, so I have somewhere to attach the head through and stick it on with some tacky fabric glue. So if you're having a bit of trouble getting your fabric through, I recommend using a blunt tool, so either a wooden tool or a plastic tool with a blunt end on it. The one that I have on the right there, that's what I use. I use that sort of pointy end, but it's really blunt. So if you use something that's sharp, it'll end up poking a hole through the fabric. So I don't recommend using like a metal tool or something, but yeah, just use something soft and round. So that's what's going to look like once the doll is finished. So I'm going to go ahead and put the armature in and attach the headpiece once the armature's inside. So I have the armature. This is a custom ball and socket armature. I have that video over on my Patreon for my $5 and up tiers. If you want to know how I made a custom armature for this particular doll, it consists of the medium-sized armature and the smaller armature for the arms, because the hands are quite small. So you can head over there if you're interested in learning how I did that. So once that's done, I can start attaching all of the pieces and sewing the doll up. So I start by attaching the head to the main body. That way there's like a nice solid base to start adding the polyfill and sewing it up. I leave it to dry roughly overnight, or at least for a couple of hours, so the head is adhered properly before I put any stuffing in, because it can come undone, because you need to sort of shove the stuffing up into all of the crevices. But in the meantime, I can start sewing things up. So I use a ladder stitch to sew all of my loose ends up, and a good quality thread. So I usually use Gutermann thread. It's really nice quality. I also use upholstery thread too. So I find that the thicker thread is a little bit easier to pull things tight, because the faux fur is quite thick fabric, so you need something with a bit of strength and a bit of quality to be able to pull the thread tight. So once it's sewn up, again, I'm attaching the pieces to the faux fur using that tacky fabric glue. This glue I get from a local store called Spotlight. You can find something in your local store. It's not that hard to find. It's just a clear glue that's quite thick and tacky, and it adheres pretty quickly and dries pretty quickly. So I highly recommend finding something like that. Moving on to sewing the tail. So the tail is a little bit smaller to sew up on a sewing machine, so it makes it a little bit harder to flip it the right way around. So for the thinner tails, I usually sew it up by hand. But you can also cut a bit of time by sewing the tip up on the sewing machine and then going ahead and sewing it the rest by hand. So once that's done, I can start adding that polyfill. The neck area is nice and secure, so I can start shoving all the polyfill in and making the shape of the prairie dog. So I use a polyfill that's used for like cushions and stuff. I have a video again on my YouTube for the type of polyfill that I use. But there's other options of stuffing and stuff as well if you're interested in trying something else. So I apply the faux fur to the head once it's all been sewn up, and then I can start adding any little details that I needed to add. So redoing the eye, the nose, the mouth area, the ear area for this instance, and also the feet area. So I just add some of that. It depends what color I'm using. But I usually use a fabric paint. So I've also added the colouring for the yellowing as well. So I have a few videos on my Patreon about colouring and stuff for fur, and also on my YouTube. So that's pretty much it from me today. I hope you enjoyed the video and you learnt a little thing or two. I can't help but call this one Alan. So yeah, thanks to my patrons for supporting me. I really appreciate it. And check me out on Instagram, Facebook, Creatures of Nat, shop at creaturesofnat.com, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye bye!